This project focused on water quality and streamwater salinization across an urbanization gradient in Worcester, Massachusetts. First, I would like to acknowledge the funding sources, faculty and staff, and community partners who have supported this project. Also, I would like to acknowledge the students who worked on this project and continue to work on it, those who provided access to sampling sites, as well as many other supporters. The purpose of this study was to examine how water quality changes along an urbanization gradient. We hypothesized that the water quality parameters will be worse in subwatersheds with a greater percentage of developed land. Essentially, as you enter areas with more developed land, you will find worse water quality conditions. Water quality parameters are very important indicators on the health of a watershed. There are many seasonal and spatial changes that determine where contaminants enter a watershed and how they move throughout a watershed, potentially into other watersheds. As land becomes more urbanized, there's an increase in contaminants found in a watershed. So we wanted to see if we could observe this in our local watershed. This study was carried out in the lower portion of the Tatnick Brook watershed located in Worcester, Massachusetts. This figure, created in ArcGIS, displays the different types of land use in the entire watershed as well as more closely in our area of study. Red dots indicate our sample sites, blue lines are streams, and the many other colors display different land use types. It's important to note on the map, as we travel down the watershed from the Holden reservoirs, we see less green areas, which indicate forests, wetlands, and grasslands, and we see more gray and yellow around the water bodies, which indicate impervious surfaces and developed open space. Therefore, this watershed represents a natural test case for how an urbanization gradient affects water quality parameters. We will now pivot to individual site descriptions. We focus primarily on Cook's Pond and Patch Reservoir. It's important to note that Cook's flows into Patch. At each lake or pond, we had 5 different sample sites. 3 sites were streams, Cook's had 3 streams inflowing, and Patch had 2 inflow and 1 outflow, and 2 were on the lake or pond, 1 at the deepest point and 1 at each spillway. We conducted fieldwork bi-weekly from May 2022 through December of 2022. However, conductivity measurement collections started earlier. These measurements were taken starting in September of 2021 and they were sampled bi-weekly. In the main field season, the following parameters were always sampled at each site: dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, conductivity, total phosphorus, and soluble phosphorus, with soluble phosphorus only being taken at the deep lake site. Once a month, nitrates, ammonia concentrations, and total suspended solids were also measured. Highlights of results for Cook's Pond include temperature and DO measurements. For the temperature figure, on the x-axis we have the sampling date and the y-axis is the temperature in degrees Celsius. We see at both the surface and the bottom of the lake an increase in temperature as we enter the summer months and then a decrease in temperature as we enter the fall months. For the dissolved oxygen figure, on the x-axis we have the sampling date and the y-axis is dissolved oxygen in milligrams per liter. At both the surface and the bottom we see a decrease in DO as we enter the summer months and an increase in DO as we enter the fall months. The very different temperature and DO values between the surface and deep waters in the summer months indicates typical summertime lake stratification. If you would like to read the full water quality report for Cook's Pond, it's linked at the bottom of the slide. Highlights of results for Patch Reservoir include temperature and DO measurements as well. For the temperature figure, we again have sampling date on the x-axis and temperature in degrees Celsius on the y-axis. We again see at both the surface and the bottom of the lake an increase in temperature as we enter the summer months and then a decrease in temperature as we enter the fall months. For dissolved oxygen, we once again have sampling date on the x-axis and dissolved oxygen in milligrams per liter on the y-axis. We have the same pattern of decreased DO in the summer months and increased DO in the fall months, but at the more urbanized patch, the period of deep anoxia and intense water stratification happens sooner and lasts longer than at Cook's. If you would like to read the full water quality report for Patch Reservoir, it's also linked at the bottom of the slide. Next, we have some conductivity results. We are looking at the monthly average of specific conductance within the Tatnick Brook from October of 2021 to December of 2022. On the x-axis, we have the sampling month and the y-axis is specific conductance in microsiemens per centimeter. The dotted line represents Tatnick Brook at the inlet for Cook's Pond, the northernmost point in our study area, and the solid line represents the Tatnick Brook and Williams Mill Pond Spillway, which is the southernmost point in our study area. This graph shows that the specific conductance of water is increased when leaving our study site relative to the specific conductance of the water when it enters our study site. Two peaks are observed at the spillway as well as during times where either snowmelt was occurring or a drought was occurring. Lastly, we will look at the percent impervious surface versus specific conductance. On the x-axis, we have the percent impervious surface, which was calculated in ArcGIS, and on the y-axis, we have specific conductance at 25 degrees Celsius on average from May 2022 through to November of 2022. Each point is one of our study sites with all of the conductivity measurements averaged for the period previously mentioned with standard deviations. As percent impervious surfaces increase, so does the average specific conductance measured. We made two major conclusions after reviewing the results from our study. The first conclusion was we observed variation across all parameters over time and space. Some of these variations are expected due to seasonality we find within our water bodies, such as summer stratification and spring and fall mixing periods. Variations spatially are due to other causes, likely including effects of urbanization. The second conclusion is that our conductivity measurements were highly correlated to land use metrics. In other words, specific conductance was positively correlated with the percentage impervious surface area upstream of a site. A strong relationship between urbanization, impervious surface area, and salinity was observed. Next steps for this project are to determine how land use is contributing to the different conductivity values. Some factors that may be examined are the presence or absence of road salts, and if or how the groundwater impacts that conductivity of our streams. Essentially, we're trying to determine the source of variation in conductivity in these water bodies. In addition, other collaborators on the project are currently examining the ecological implications of this urbanization gradient. In the future, we will compare the biological results with these geochemical results to test for other relationships. Thank you for viewing my presentation. Feel free to contact me with any questions or comments.